Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our discussion. Do we have any here?
So Matt is on Zoom. And Matt, can you hear us?
I can. How are we all doing tonight?
Well, I can turn it up.
I can hear you all well. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. It doesn't usually,
Oh, it doesn't.
no.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just really quiet.
Okay, I'll try and speak as loud as I can if it makes it any better.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, please. All right, let me know when everyone's able to hear me, and hopefully I'll try and make this as loud as I can so that everyone's able to jump in and answer any questions as well as throw anything my way if anything does come up. Am I coming through a little bit clearer now? Because I'm having a little bit of a harder time hearing you all.
Grab some speakers, man, real quick, see if that helps us.
Okay. Just let me know when you would like me to jump into it, and I'll be happy to take it away.
Be able to use this too, or no, like if you switch to him? Or no?
I have no clue about that thing. Beyond me.
You're sitting.
Well, hopefully in the meantime, everyone's having a nice evening so far. I appreciate you all giving me the time of day. I'll make sure to keep this pretty tight with your time as well as we go through it. I'm sure you have other things to be jumping to in the agenda. And then whenever I get the go ahead here, I'll be happy to jump in.
Sir, we appreciate it. We can hear you. Hopefully you can hear us.
Yes, I can. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I think I cut someone off earlier there when they were introducing me. Was that Danielle by any chance?
Yes, kind of. And then I stepped away for a speaker, so you're good.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Well, good evening. And again, thank you very much for making the time for me. Just to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Matt Katzmata. I'm an account executive here at Waterworth. Again, as I said, I want to make sure I'm able to be pretty tight and efficient with your time as there's other things you all have to be jumping to today. So I'll keep it to maybe no more than, let's say, 15, 20 minutes with some time for questions as well. And then if anything comes up, please feel free to cut me off and I'll be happy to let you get back to the regularly scheduled items as well. For a bit more context for you all, I think that Danielle has also introduced perhaps some of my conversations to you all in some earlier discussions, but I've had a number of meetings now with her regarding the goals, priorities, and really the challenges of the village and how they align with Waterworth, specifically as it pertains to financial forecasting, long-range planning, and really utility rate analysis. Now, my goal today is to really give you all a very quick overview of our solution and our business model. For the sake of time, as I said, I won't go too deep, but essentially at a highest kind of level, we would focus on ensuring the village is able to successfully fund capital improvements into the future, ensure full cost recovery for each utility fund, as well as in some cases the general fund, and then also make sure to protect customer affordability and equitability to allow you all as decision makers to have a very clear and transparent understanding of what really goes into this often complicated industry. Now, as I said, I will make sure to save some time to answer any of your questions that come up. But please, if I'm going through something and you'd like to throw something my way, I'm having a little bit hard of a time hearing you all. So just jump in, shout my name out, and I'll be happy to address it. Okay. But just for a bit more additional background information for you all, again, as I said, our priority is going to be looking at as these see these changes in costs, timing of projects, inflationary aspects. We want to be able to understand how this is going to impact our position and really our financial future. So again, taking that information and making sure it's a lot more accessible and visual so that you all can make the best decisions for your constituents. Now, we had about 15 years of experience as rate consultants before pivoting our business model to offering essentially a cloud-based solution, which is really half software, where we are able to provide very strong data-driven recommendations to your team, and then also half professional support and advising with our background in the consulting side to make sure that, again, they are not alone in this and we are really the ones driving the charge. So because of this, we currently work with hundreds of utilities across the country, not just exclusive to water, wastewater, or stormwater. Now, what I'm going to do here is really get into some of the capabilities of our solution today. As I said, please do not hesitate to throw any questions my way. But as you can see here, this is really going to be the home screen of Waterworth. So again, this is going to be where we can start looking at any other utility fund. And it's also not just going to be, as I said, a software that we're looking to provide because we are half software, but also half professional support and advising. And our goal is really to take, a lot of the low level data input off of your own team's sake and really make sure that we also have our senior members of our team, experienced in doing council presentations, budget workshops, really keeping this the forefront of mind and really allowing your team to have access to a fractional full-time employee basis as well. Now, for today's demonstration's sake, I'm going to take us into a water enterprise fund. And again, this is really just going to be looking at the bread and butter of Waterworth. Now, this is all what I believe you all have seen.
Please.
Of course.
Is your presentation gonna follow the handout? Or, because I think I've seen that graph similarly, yeah, so. If you have our handout in front of you, would it be possible for you to just reference page number? Well, we don't have to, never mind. Do we have page numbers?
Matt, they're looking at the proposal you sent me.
I see. Yes. So I'll make sure to touch on all of those points for you all. That proposal is just going to be kind of a summary of what Daniela and I have talked about. Just for your sake of time here today, I didn't want to have to go through everything there. I just wanted to give you a bit better of a higher level overview of the things that I think would be very important to you all. But I'll be happy to answer anything specifically in questions as they come up later on, if that makes sense for everyone. Perfect. Okay, well, as I was saying here again, this is going to be really what is our long-term financial model. So this is going to be what I believe you all have seen historically working with Benzinski in the spreadsheets and really tables. And again, typically what you're going to be getting provided within a 20-page PDF, for example. Except this is going to be live in real time and continuously updated. And for this demonstration's sake here today, this is going to be a fictitious data set. It's not your own, but we can really customize this to project out whatever timelines would be beneficial for our capital side, for our financial future, really to make sure that we are able to understand what's coming up down the line. But again, this is going to make sure that we are able to provide your staff the ability to dynamically understand the financial position, as I said, of the village based on the decisions made today. So what I'm going to do, because there's a lot of colors jumping out as us here, I'm going to start off just by breaking down essentially different variables. Now, this is going to be our revenue requirements, or really looking at, again, what our total expenses are. You can see here, I have our operating expenses growing over time as well with inflationary aspects, also accounting for our debt service. So any debt that we've had within, in this case, the water fund historically to fund some of our needs, maybe any proposed debt we have coming on in future years to be able to account for some of our future projects. And then lastly, what are the capital improvements? So again, we've taken some end of year totals, what has been spent historically on our capital projects. And again, this is going to be one of the biggest reasons we pivoted away from offering the more traditional consultant-led rate study, because right now, if you are all to go get a rate study performed, they would ask you for your upcoming capital projects, the timing of these projects, and the cost associated. And as we've all seen, especially in recent years, these are often drastically changing. So again, with Waterworth, not only can we update this model in real time as we're seeing these changes to understand what the impact is going to be to our utility fund, but more importantly, as I'll get into now, we can actually demonstrate what the burden will be when it's placed on our ratepayers. Now, in this case, what we've done is the most basic form of a rate study. Again, we've just done that in a matter of minutes. However, instead of a historical snapshot in time, this is a living, breathing study. Now, in this case, I'm going to jump on over to our revenue bars, and this is going to be looking at our sale of service. So in this case, this is going to be looking at our water revenues. What are we generating annually when it comes to our rates? And from there, we can have this adjusted on different assumptions, whether that's population growth, maybe decline in usage, or even forecasted across the board adjustments. We can also account for any other operating or non-operating revenue, maybe any developer contributions, which is going to be ways we can make sure growth is paying for itself. And then lastly, any grants and borrowed funds, as this has also been part of our funding strategy. But now that you all can see our revenues highlighted like this, when I start building in our background again, which is really what we were looking at earlier, being our revenue requirements or our expenses, you're really able to start seeing how we're actually stacking up in the long run. So maybe in years 2019 to around, in this case, it looks like 2024, we can see that our revenue bars are matching pretty nicely with our background, right? And because of this, in these years, we'd probably anticipate cash to be fairly healthy and balanced. Now, it's not until we get to around 2025 here, we can see we're experiencing a little bit of a funding gap. And as this does continue on over time, we'd probably anticipate cash to be negatively impacted. And again, this is just going to be ultimately confirmed when I turn on our cash position punchline here of this water fund, and it shows that it's maybe not moving in the best direction coming into the future years. So again, not only is this an extension of our financial projection, so we can see what is really coming up just outside of our current outlook, maybe if we're only forecasting at a year. Again, it's going to be very hard to understand what these longer term implications are going to look like for our fund. But this is also going to be where we really start our conversations here today on how we can use Waterworth to address this current cash position. Now, what I will say to keep it pretty quick with all of you today, I'm going to show us two ways we can actually go about fixing our cash. One, which is probably the historical way that most communities in the country fix this, which is where maybe utility rates aren't a popular discussion as we want to be mindful of our residents, right? So in this case, we can just see maybe what happens if we defer our capital projects, and let's kick that can down the road and see what happens to our cash position in the short term, right? So in this case, I can come to our capital expenses here. And again, this is going to be where our team is able to keep our capital plans live and dynamic as we see these changes. And I think for most American utilities, this has been the story, right? These assets are out of sight, out of mind. They're never fun to talk about, especially when we're looking at raising utility rates. However, also, as we've seen, the longer we defer capital projects and rate increases, typically the more expensive these projects are going to be, and they're still going to be required to be completed. So in this case, since we start seeing our cash drop in 25, maybe this is where, we decide to look at this a little bit more thoroughly, and we see in 25, when we're considering some of our projects here we have listed, we can see that the most expensive project in 25 is this $3 million water line replacement. Now, in this case, we can just see the consequence of deferring maybe this project. If we take this $3 million project from 25 and we just remove that from our short-term plan, you can see it's given us a little bit of an injection of cash. However, that project's not going anywhere and it still needs to be completed. So maybe if we push it out to something like 2028, a couple years down the line, we can see what it's now done to our position. However, we also have a 15% annual increase for the inflationary side for this project. And again, I don't know about you all, but we've seen project inflation between 10 to 15, all the way up to 50, 60%, depending on where you are across the country. In this case, I was a little bit more modest with it, but you can see that now that project cost has gone up by 50%. You can see it's, again, going to be affecting our cash position much more substantially, and we still have to be able to find a way to fund it. But in this case, we can demonstrate visually that project costs are not going to get any cheaper. We need a more proactive approach. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just reset this here, bring that back to the 3 million and 25. And this is maybe where, again, I know we've gone through the more proactive approach, especially recently when we're looking at across the board rate adjustments or just trying to understand what other solutions we can leverage. Maybe this is where we come to our step 7. And in this case, we're going to be looking at across the board rate adjustments. Maybe this is where Danielle comes to you all as decision makers and says, well, right now, working with Waterworth, I think we need to look at increasing our revenues. We've got some large upcoming capital need, and I know that that's been a topic of conversation as well. We do have some aged infrastructure we're looking to address. However, costs are also increasing. So often the question is, well, right now, maybe if we started the conversations in 24, 25, well, why would we look at increasing our rates if our cash position looks pretty healthy, right? It hasn't gotten close yet to our reserve policy, which is this red line. Why don't we just wait till maybe something like 2026? And again, this is where, maybe if we wait till something like 2026, it's going to take something a little bit more staggering, right? Maybe instead of, in this case, the community is already doing 2% across the board adjustments. Maybe if they wait till 2026, it's going to take something like a 10% increase to be able to offset this position. Now, 10% hasn't quite done it yet. Maybe it's going to take something a little bit more substantial, like a 22% increase to be able to offset this position. And again, while we've been able to balance out our cash position, I think we could all agree that's going to be rate shock on our residents. That's typically not going to be the types of decisions we want to pass through on, and often where we want to be a bit more mindful of how can we maybe ease out that cost burden over time. So instead, perhaps this is where you all have worked with a more traditional consultant. They come back and they advocate for in 24, maybe historically we should have done a 7% increase. Maybe the same in 25, they say another 7%. Perhaps in 26, instead of that 5 or the 22%, we decided to go with a 5%, and then maybe some threes out into the future. Again, giving us an understanding of what's coming up. Now, this is our background. We do understand that there is value in being able for us to take the best information that you all have access to at any given time and provide this level of analysis. However, we also know that things change. So maybe in 24, a jump from a 2% to a 7%, perhaps it wasn't feasible. Maybe we had an increase in another fashion and we just really couldn't put that cost burden on our residents. So the most we were able to leverage was a 4%. Now, these other 4 years of the study that we probably paid good money for aren't necessarily going to be holding up their weight and value. So this is simply, again, the story that we've been told numerous times and really one of the foundational aspects of Waterworth. So maybe this is where we can come back in 26, look for that last 3% and still be able to make a move in the right direction. And again, balance this out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not my demonstration here today advocating for us to start looking at drastically increasing our rates or proposing even rate adjustments at all. My point is this is very dynamic. We can ensure that everyone can get on the right side of the table when it comes to understanding the long-term impacts. And if we don't want to start looking at putting this cost burden on our residents, let's start leveraging other ways within Waterworth to maybe explore grant opportunities to other low-interest loans, ways we can really find a sustainable approach to this while still understanding what is coming up for us when we're looking at our capital side. Now, we also have the ability to get much more granular when we're looking at the rate design and math behind how we're actually setting these rates and take a deep dive into the equitability and affordability side. And for the sake of time today, we didn't really go through that. However, I have taken staff through these components, such as conducting a cost of service analysis, which is really where we are starting to determine who should be paying for what based on their burden to the system. We've also gone through the rate design piece, which is looking at full rate restructuring to make sure that the residents who are very, mindful of the usage aren't paying anywhere near those large commercial users, and then also the long-term planning and asset features as well. Now, my final concluding thought for us today, and then I'll open up for questions, is again, to be totally transparent, maybe some of you all are thinking, well, didn't we recently go through something like this? I know I was given a resource from staff that we've gone through a recent study working with Benzinski, as I brought up earlier. And just for a bit of context, I'm going to give you all an idea of really how we differentiate to make that quite clear as a whole. Again, when we're coming to, in this case here, what was the deliverable or one of the proposal aspects from the firm that you all worked with for this rate study. Again, as you can see here within the overview, when we're considering the water and sewer funds, looking at operations and maintenance, current debt schedules, capital improvement plan, our cash position, as well as user rates. Again, that is everything that we went over in the very beginning of our call when we were just looking at building up and breaking down this long-term financial model. Now, that being said, this is all within Waterworth, continuously accounted for instead of a historical information and instantaneously accessed from your staff at any given time. Now, the other piece to this, I think it's important for me to note, is within this deliverable as well. Again, in this report, it does acknowledge, despite all the good work that they did, that these things change. right? It does acknowledge the fact that whether it's the firm itself or internal users, analysis will be needed, whether it's yearly or at least for the next future years, to make sure we're able to keep this up to date, as we can't expect what we don't know. And again, that is exactly why we created Waterworth and our platform, to ensure that we have confidence in these decisions. Again, these consultants, they confirm their assumptions will change and that it needs to be revisited. Now, as said, it can either be done with that firm or done internally. And again, with staff, this is where we offer both. So we provide the credibility and expertise for the third party for the actual analysis. And then we're also able to give total financial control to internal staff to run these scenarios and again, have that independence. So it all comes back to the future planning side. Again, as I said, as demonstrated, the decisions we make today are going to have a drastic impact on the future. Therefore, it is essential, really, that we just not only forecast our future, but have certainty in the data and analysis we base our decisions off of today. Now, at this point, I don't want to use up any more time other than I have already for you all when it comes to the capabilities, but I'd love to open this up for questions, throw anything my way, whether it's from the proposal, whether it's from the resources, anything else I can put some light onto. Please have at it. Hopefully everyone was able to hear me well as we went through that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Matt, I have a couple of questions for you, if I may.
Of course.
Did you reach out to Blissfield or did we reach out to you? Could someone remind me of that?
My colleague reached out to Danielle originally, and then that was how we started the conversation.
Okay, thank you. This is
Of
for
course.
water only and it does not include sewer, is that correct?
It includes both water and wastewater, or water and sewer. We have the capability to apply this to any government fund or utility. Again, for our sake, our conversations have only been around water, sewer. But if this is something down the line, again, like most communities, we'll typically start looking into things like general fund or any other utilities that also are within your purview.
When you made that statement about some businesses, if I understood correctly, have a different burden on the system, can you give an example of that, illustrate something for us?
Of course. That's a very good question. I think now this is again going to be where we want to differentiate ourselves in regards to our analysis, but at the highest level, again, obviously you all know, each of you in that room probably use a different amount of water, and therefore we want to make sure that not only are we being mindful of, in one side of the spectrum, the little old lady on a fixed income in a one-bedroom home using next to nothing, but we also want to make sure that she's not ever paying anywhere near the large industrial or commercial users. I know in this case, ZFS, the possibility of having a double of our current actual usage. Again, we want to make sure that this is proportioned out and that equity is really taken into account. So in this case, this is going to be where we can actually drop years of raw billing data from from your own billing software into Waterworth. And in this case, I actually can show you, this will be a great example for us when we're looking at equity. Now, in this case here, we can actually demonstrate where every single one of your users, and again, forgive me, this is a templated data set, so it's not your own data. But in this community here, you can see where every single user would fall when we're breaking it into different customer classifications. Now, this is also something I've spoken with Danielle. We can actually help determine what these classifications would look like so that we can start exploring the equity. But in this case, you can see that our commercial users, as indicated by the lighter blue here, water consumption for their case is actually around 44%. However, they're actually only contributing around 33% of our total revenues. Now, if we look at the other side of the equation, being our residential users, in this case, they're actually only using around 36% of our water, but they're actually paying for more than what they're using, and even more so for these residents, those being outside of village limits. Now, in this case, they're only using 18%, contributing over 26%. Now, there are two levels of analysis you can do in this case. One, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be something like a cost of service analysis, which is essentially where we can take a deep dive into this, work with your team to say, well, okay, do these inequities make sense? Do we have maybe such few levels or amounts of commercial users that despite them using the most amount of water, maybe there's such a low administrative cost for our team and our staff that it makes sense that they're not fully recouping their costs? And then maybe on the inverse side of that, we can see, well, maybe for our residents outside of village limits, since it does cost us more to deliver services to them, would it then make sense that they're recovering more of these costs? Now, if that's something that you would like accounted for in your rates, this is where we can start going individual users and breaking down to each level again, where they are located, again, how much they're using, from there, creating a structure of equity. But instead, if we didn't want to do a cost of service analysis, we could still run a scenario like in this case, maybe if we just added a simple dollar to the commercial user's base charge, we could actually see in this case, this proposed or projected revenue contribution would increase it or, make that a little bit more affordable and fair across the board, but there's probably still some room to be done. Now, that is only going to be one of the examples I've brought up here today. I think that if there's any other questions around that, I'll be happy to go into it, but I don't want to use too much of your time getting into the granular aspects.
That was a good generalization. However, if we did something with the levels,
Mhm.
wouldn't we lose income coming into our revenue coming into the village if we made things more equitable?
See, that's a great point. And that is exactly why, for the rate side, we created Waterworth. Because if we're just going to be prescribing you all from a traditional rate study or rate consultant perspective, it's very hard for us to know and understand these variables if we're just saying, from our total analysis, here's one rate structure. We'll see in 5 years after we've seen what those revenues look like. Instead, what we want to be able to do is, in this case, I'm going to just quickly pull up a slide here. We can actually start running different scenarios and proposals based off of what we've seen as historical usage, historical burdens on your system, as well as in this case, maybe we wanted to run 2 side-by-side comparisons looking at, well, what happens if we have a massive user come to our system? Because of this, we want to be more mindful of that burden we're putting on the everyday resident, but also we still need to increase our revenues most likely because of our large amount of capital need. I know in my internal conversations, we have aged infrastructure around 90 years old. This is where we're probably looking to be a little more aggressive on some of that replacement. How do we really strike that balance? Our job here at Waterworth is to take your data and ensure that regardless of your own priorities as decision makers, you have the ability to make the most well-informed call at the end of the day. Now, this is again really speaking to that partnership we're looking to build. You want us to run these different scenarios, leverage different pieces, whether it's additional funding sources to ease that cost burden for your residents. Maybe we wanted to defer increases, defer projects. Well, let's understand the consequences of this. That's really speaking to the living nature of this relationship we're looking to provide. And then, if I may, the last thing I think that is actually relevant to this is we can actually show you all at any given point in time, not just where from a high level average perspective, every individual would fall if we had to have the difficult conversation around rates. But in this case here, you could see we actually can plot every single user within your system and visually demonstrate to them in a way that they can understand. Well, in this case here, we can see based on the percentage of accounts, this is going to be maybe where majority of our residents are going to be falling. Maybe in this case, we want to make sure that their increases are only proportionate to what they're using. Now, at the same time, maybe this is going to be, as we discussed earlier, those residents further away from us cost us a little bit more to deliver services. Maybe they're soaking up a little bit more of that burden. And then lastly, being our commercial and industrial users, being able to, again, flip the bill if necessary, but also having the justification as to why. Now, at the same time, having, the little old lady, as I said, barely using any water, making sure maybe we're even able to give them a bit more of an incentive because, again, we want to make sure that it is fair. Now, that's going to be tied into really every level because we can, if you'd like us to, since we are cloud-based, we could pull up any one of your own individual account IDs, show your own historical usage, and then from there overlay that with whatever our new proposed rate structure would be. And you could actually see in real time, well, maybe a 2%, 3% sounds a little bit scary, but based on our historical usage, maybe we're only experiencing, in this case, you can see an $8 change throughout the entire year. So again, all about transparency for you all. We feel in order to make the best decisions that affect our long term, you need to have all this information at your disposal, or at least have it within staff's hands, working with our team so that you always have confidence in the decisions you're making.
Thank you for that explanation.
Of course. That was a great question. Thank you for asking it. All right. Well, I've gone over a little bit of my time there. Please, if there are any other questions, I'd love to answer them. And maybe in that case, it won't be all left to Danielle as well to answer them after I'm gone. So please, anything else?
I've got one, Matt. Who actually inputs the data? Is that something that our staff provides to you and you guys maintain the numbers?
Yes, sir. So that is on us. So
Okay.
the entire purpose there is our goal is to save time and aggravation. Transparently, sir, our purpose is we don't want to have to add additional time and burden to your staff. So whether it's new changes to our capital improvement plans, whether it's you advising maybe we're deferring a simple project in one case, that's never going to fall on the laps of your own staff. That's really, again, where our team provides individual team members to be fully at the disposal of your own team.
Well, a lot of what you're covering, I think, makes sense because number one, you talk transparency. Obviously, I think a lot of our residents don't understand, why we have to raise rates, what kind of infrastructure we have,
Yeah.
improve down the line. Again, so being transparent and getting people to understand, well, it is what it costs to produce and treat the water and the sewer.
Of course.
And to be able to explain that well, to get people to understand, we may not like it, but again, facts over opinion are a little bit more important. So again, getting that information, be able to provide that information, that raw data to people, say, this is what it's costing us. We're planning for the future. We're trying to offset these massive increases. We're trying to, we're very cognizant, we pay these rates too. So yes, we have to continue to invest in our infrastructure, but how do we, not kick the can down the road like we have? How do we not try to, have to see, 10, 15% increases across the year at different times? Let's be more consistent about it. So it's not such a, hitting the wall to people. So, and then talking about bringing in large scale users, obviously we're talking about plant. We've discussed other municipalities, the DOR system. Do we go back to basics and we look at potentially, getting rid of our source? Do we outsource from another municipality? So again, I think we're at that, again, back to basics, starting it from scratch and saying, what's gonna be the most cost efficient, most cost effective way to go about this? I think it's a good investment for us to say, we're working with consultants, we're working with engineers. How do we want to move forward to run or to provide water and sewer as efficiently as we can? I think it's a very good process, and something, again, to where we can provide the people with the data to say, this is why we are where we are.
I truly appreciate that, and I couldn't agree more, especially because, as you said, it's an out of sight, out of mind industry, right? It's oftentimes, especially in my experience, it's hard to articulate, especially to those who don't have a background in it, why there's multi-million-dollar assets you can't see aging over time, especially because they last so long. And when you combine that with, the incredible cost increases that we've seen, it's hard to really be able to justify that at the end of the day. And this is where not only do we want to provide the level of analysis when we're getting into something as, complex as rate design, but also ensure that your staff doesn't have to wait, 3 to 6 months for a deliverable just to be able to understand where do we currently sit at this given time. In order for you all to make the most of your, monthly sessions, it'd be great to have, again, a constant understanding of, this is our status quo. This is maybe one option if we decide to look at further reinvestment. Perhaps this is a deferral. Either way, we have confidence in our decision making. Now, again, I really appreciate you all making the time. If there is anything else, I'll take those questions now. Otherwise, like I said, I'm sure you have other things you need to be jumping to as well.
How long have you guys been in business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, we were prior to the creation of Waterworth, which we've been now doing for around 11 years. We were rate consultants. Historically, my founders, as well as a lot of his senior staff, were around 15. So between the two of those, a couple decades as a whole.
Gotcha. All right. I knew that you had stated the initial, and then you guys made the switch.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
of course. Of course. The last thing I was just going to ask is, Danielle, I apologize. Is there anything maybe I missed going through the presentation today? Anything else that you felt would be valuable to speak to just before I let you all get back to it?
I don't think so, Matt. I think that was good, and definitely if we have more questions, I'll reach out to you.
Okay, perfect.
There's obviously different tiers and like contract, what we would pay them, right? And we can kind of talk that amongst ourselves, how we want to go about that.
Yeah, that's in your proposal, and you can talk about that more.
Yeah. I think just to quickly kind of give you all a breakdown, because I'm sure you're all looking at cost being one of the largest points there. The 3 tiers that are provided within your proposal, if you'll go to that, I can simply break that down for us quickly here as well. So I'm just going to pull that up on my screen so we can quickly look at that, make sure I'm tying that to the right piece. Now, the first quote there, that's going to be the 10.7 figure, and that is going to be the inclusion of all key features. The difference between that and the following quote is the cost of service analysis. Now, if we're considering a massive new user joining our system, whether they end up indeed joining our system or perhaps they do not, the cost of service component would be the most beneficial single-handedly piece we could look at investing into. And the reason for that is because you all can very clearly understand that your costs as a system are going to drastically change now that we have a massive new burden placed on it. In order to ensure that every user is paying what they should be in regards to how that pie of costs are divvied up, that's going to be what a cost of service analysis essentially is. It's looking at how do we make sure this is a fair way of dividing costs when we're understanding changes to our systems, whether it's growth, additions, new users, in an ongoing, continuous fashion. Now, the second quote there excludes the cost of service component if we're looking at something that would be a little bit more affordable and still set us up for a solid baseline. And that also includes the rate design piece. Now, that's going to be where we can actually take into account your current rate structure. Now, from that, account for your billing information when we're looking at how is each one of your individual customers using your utilities. And then from there, make sure that they have a structure in place that is not only generating sufficient revenue for your long-term needs, but also balanced when we're looking at affordability. And then the last piece there is if we're just looking to get started with something that's a little bit more of a baseline. I know we've recently gone through that study. If we have total confidence in our current rate structure the way that it is, and we just like to be able to understand what percentage increases over time would be, that's where we can, at the very beginning at least, start off without the rate design and cost of service components. That's going to be that 6,300 figure.
So if you're looking at the gold or guess number one, that would kind of be rather than a meter size, it would be more of a unit or a user, like you were talking, say a car wash or a restaurant or the ethanol plant, these large scale users and how they're affecting the fixed costs as well as variable costs on the system itself.
Yes, sir. So if we wanted to get into something like that, especially with changes as we're talking about as well, that would be where we're going to need to at the very least consider rate design to be able to look at, well, how do we break out those different customer categories? And then from there, if we're accounting for replacement values, we're accounting for, well, since they do have larger meters, because it's going to cost us more to replace those meters, we want to make sure that they are reinvesting more annually. That's going to be at the baseline level, the second quote that you have in front of you there. But if you all just wanted to apply a more so, CPI adjustment or inflationary percentage increase or decrease annually, and you didn't want to get into the weeds of how we're actually structuring our revenues, that's going to be where the last option there, where it says excluding cost of service and rate design, is going to be our baseline package. Now, from my conversations internally, it sounds like at the very least we'd want to consider the second there where we are actually having rate design so that we can dive into some of these pieces. But I will, again, obviously leave that all up to you all for your internal dialogue.
You use your own systems for within your own business? Because I see, two different ways of asking this question. Partly of just being smart alecky is I see you have a increase automatically 5% a year. So I'm going to assume that you've done a cost-based analysis on what you all do for your customers, and then you treat our size municipality the same way that we would treat our individual water customers. You treat your municipalities very similarly. They have
Yes, sir.
Industrial, they have 5,000 users.
That's a very good question. And
the Kool-Aid you're wanting us to drink, if you're drinking it as well.
I like it. I'll tell you exactly how we break down our costs transparently. So we do it based on the size of the utility, first and foremost, and then that's going to account for a couple things. First and foremost, revenues, because in this case, again, this is going to be considering the water and wastewater service areas. And then we also account for customer connections. So again, how many metered and unmetered customers do we have? Service population also being accounted for. And then lastly, what are we actually looking at in regards of capabilities? How specific are we trying to get within the modules? How much of a need is there? And in this case, that's why I've broken out into 3 different options for you all. I don't want that to be overwhelming, and I'd be happy to talk through it again, but I don't want you to feel like you are buying into something where you won't be able to soak the most out of it. I would say that the most baseline package there that I've sent for you all is essentially going to be a continuous living, breathing version of that Benzinski study we all went through historically. Whereas the other 2 aspects are going to be where we can start getting into a little bit more of who's paying for what and how exactly would we like these costs to be dispersed over the next, few decades.
Thank you.
Of course, that's a great question. Now, again, I'll ask one more time. If there are any questions, please throw it my way. Otherwise, I'll let you all go for the evening.
I think we're good, man. We do appreciate the time and the explanations, and we'll definitely be in touch with you.
Of course. I really appreciate you all making the time for me again. I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to make a great partnership out of this all. And other than that, have a great rest of your evening. And, talk soon.
Sure.